The ocean was calm that night. Too calm. Aboard the research vessel Erebus, the crew sat huddled around the sonar screens, faces pale in the blue glow of the monitors. Beneath them, 3 miles down into the black, something pulsed in the trench. Slow, methodical, almost intentional. Thump, thump. It wasn't just noise. It had rhythm. A pattern. Dr. Elena Marrow, the expedition's lead archaeologist, leaned in closer, her breath fogging the screen. "Run it through the filter again," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. The technician complied. The screen shivered. What they heard next wasn't mechanical. It wasn't geological. It was voices. Thousands of them, whispering, muttering, layering over one another in a tapestry of sound no human mind could fully grasp. Words twisted and overlapped, some sharp like knives, others low and droning like a death chant. They tried to isolate a single language. They failed. The computer's language recognition system glitched and froze, spitting out a stream of nonsense characters. Ancient Greek, Aramaic, Akkadian, words that hadn't been spoken for thousands of years, and others that had never been spoken at all. "We're picking up a ruin," one of the divers, Tom Reyes, said half-jokingly. "An old city, maybe? Atlantis?" But no one laughed. The trench where the signal came from wasn't on any maps. No shipwrecks were reported there. No known ruins. It was a dead zone. A place sailors had avoided for centuries without ever knowing why. As the night wore on, the decision was made. They would dive at first light. Too much money, too much fame, too much curiosity to resist. Before the crew went to their bunks, Dr. Marrow stared once more at the trembling sonar image. A spire. A single black tooth jutting from the ocean floor. Somehow, through the static and whispers, she swore she heard a single clear word rising above the rest. Ascend. But they were going down, into darkness, into something that had been waiting for them. The sun was just a pale ghost on the horizon when the divers suited up. 4 of them. Tom Reyes, the veteran, cocky but reliable. Lena Park, the deep-sea specialist, silent and sharp-eyed. Victor Shaw, the skeptic, always needing proof. And Elena Marrow, the mind behind the expedition, whose obsession burned brighter than her fear. The ocean swallowed them almost instantly. By the time they reached 500 meters, their world had become a featureless void. Black water pressing against the glass of their helmets like a living thing. Only their floodlights cut the dark. Thin beams slicing through endless nothingness. The trench yawned below, a jagged scar in the seafloor. At 2,000 meters, the combs began to crackle. "Anyone hear that?" Tom's voice wavered. "It's like singing?" Only static replied. No one else spoke, but each diver heard it. A hum just at the edge of hearing. Low, pulsing, growing louder the deeper they went. The sonar mounted on the ROV, remotely operated vehicle, ahead of them pinged wildly. Shapes flickered across the monitors. Massive, half-formed structures buried in silt. Pillars, arches, crumbling stairways leading nowhere. And then it appeared. Their floodlights illuminated it all at once. A spire of black stone piercing up from the seabed, so tall it vanished into darkness above them. Covered in barnacles, coral, and something that looked disturbingly like withered flesh fused with the stone. A shudder ran through the team. That's no natural formation," Lena whispered, her voice distorted by static. They hovered closer. The stone was carved with intricate glyphs, shifting patterns that seemed almost to writhe when observed too long. Eyes, mouths, spirals, words in no language. They recognized, but somehow still understood in the pit of their stomachs. Their instruments began to fail. Depth gauges spun. Compasses pointed nowhere. The sonar emitted bursts of shrieking noise before dying completely. On the comes, the whispering returned, no longer soft, but louder, urgent, forming a chattering chorus that seemed to bypass the ears and speak inside their skulls. Enter, enter, enter. Against every instinct, the divers obeyed. At the base of the spire was a great wound in the stone, a broken doorway, half choked with sand and debris, large enough for a person to slip through. Tom Reyes went first, casting his light inside. It didn't reach the back of the chamber. It didn't even seem to touch the darkness within. He turned back to the others. Lena and Victor floated, motionless. Elena Marrow stared, transfixed, her gloved hand trembling inches from the entrance. Without a word, she pushed herself forward and disappeared inside. The others followed, swallowed one by one. Behind them, the trench seemed to close, the darkness growing thicker, hungrier, as if the ocean itself was drawing a breath, preparing to speak. The last thing Victor heard before crossing the threshold was a voice, old as stone, deep as the sea. We never fell. We were buried. And then, silence. Only the tower remained, its unseen heart beating slow and steady beneath the crushing weight of the deep, waiting for them to listen, waiting for them to understand. The darkness inside the tower was thick, almost solid, as if the water itself resisted their lights. The beams from their helmets barely pierced a few feet ahead, casting the interior in shifting, sickly halos. Strange organic shapes floated past, scraps of old banners? Flayed skin? It was impossible to tell. The walls inside were made of the same black stone, but here, free from the coral, they were smooth, carved with endless symbols that pulsed faintly, almost breathing with the rhythm of the sea. As they pushed forward, their instruments continued to fail. Even time felt broken. Seconds stretched into minutes. Minutes collapsed into heartbeats. The divers' bodies felt slow, heavy, like they were swimming through something thicker than water. Tom Reyes muttered into his mic, voice warbling with static. "Anyone else feel like we're being watched?" No one answered. Because shapes moved just beyond their lights. Too fast, too large. Sometimes a glimpse of a hand, long, bony fingers dragging across the stone. Sometimes something even larger slithering up the walls, disappearing into the black. Elena Morrow drifted ahead of them, almost hypnotized. Her gloved hand brushed the carvings, and where she touched, the glyph shimmered, as if remembering her. A low vibration rolled through the tower. Not a sound, a feeling. A deep, resonating note that passed through bone and blood. The floor ahead widened into a vast spiral corridor, sloping downward in a sickening, unnatural curve. The architecture didn't make sense. Angles met where they shouldn't. Hallways twisted like broken spines. Walls seemed to breathe, just at the corner of vision. Victor cursed and grabbed Lena's arm. We marked the path back. Now. He set up a trail line, bright orange, anchoring it to a jagged crack in the wall. But when they glanced back, the line was gone. Swallowed or moved. Lena's voice came in, sharp, panicked. "I see faces," she whispered. They turned their lights to the walls. Embedded in the stone were eyes, dozens of them, human and inhuman, all blinking slowly, watching, judging. The glyphs between them formed a mural. It showed a great tower, spiraling into the heavens. Around it, countless figures, men, women, children, all screaming as they clawed at each other. Their mouths split open, speaking different languages, their bodies twisted, their minds fractured. Above them, something vast and unseen loomed, not a god, but something older, something forgotten. And beneath the tower, a wound in the earth and a sea. Victor turned away, bile rising in his throat. "Whatever this place is," Tom said, voice low, "it was never meant to be found." Suddenly, Elena gasped, clutching her helmet. Her eyes rolled back, white with terror. Through the coms, she spoke. Not in English. Not in any language known to man. But they understood one word, a command. Kneel. The tower trembled as something vast and unseen shifted far below them, awakening after a sleep far too long. And in the cold, crushing dark, something began to climb. The tremor passed, but the tower didn't settle. It breathed, walls expanding and contracting like the lungs of some buried giant. The divers pressed forward down the spiraling corridor, but something was wrong now. Very wrong. Their lights flickered. The water felt heavier, thicker. The air tanks on their backs creaked under some unseen pressure. Victor Shaw was the first to snap. He stopped in the middle of the corridor, thrashing against the water, clawing at his helmet like he was trying to tear it off. "They're in my head," he screamed over the coms. "They're speaking through my teeth." Lena and Tom grabbed him, trying to calm him down. Elena floated ahead, silent, staring into the blackness beyond. She didn't even turn around. Victor's breathing slowed. For a moment, it seemed he was coming back. Then he smiled, a wide, broken smile, and said, in a voice that wasn't his, "Tongues must scatter. Flesh must serve." And with that, he slipped free of their grip and vanished down a side corridor, swallowed by the dark. Tom swore and moved to follow, but Elena stopped him with a sharp gesture. "We stick together," she rasped, "or we die." They pressed on. The tower shifted around them. Hallways that once led forward now twisted back on themselves. Rooms appeared where none should exist. Vast, cathedral-like chambers, lined with statues of things that wore human skin-like clothing, but were not human. Each statue had a different mouth carved into its face, a perfect circle, a jagged maw, a split-down-the-middle grin, all frozen mid-scream. As they moved, the whispers returned, louder now, like a flood bursting through a dam. Their comes became a storm of shattered voices. Betrayal. Ascend? Punishment? Reborn? Each diver heard something different. Each diver saw flashes of another reality. Tom saw his childhood home submerged in black water, his mother standing at the window, smiling with a mouth full of writhing tongues. Lena saw herself drowning, hands pulling her downward, voices promising her she could breathe if she just spoke the right words. Elena saw the tower, not fallen, but risen again, stretching into an endless sky of writhing stars. Reality became elastic. Tom tried to speak, but only nonsense came out, a language he didn't know, couldn't have known, but which his mouth shaped perfectly. Lena began crying, the sound twisted and warped by her helmet. They reached a landing, an ancient stairwell leading further down into the tower's bowels. Above them, the way they came was gone. Only a solid black wall remained, pulsing faintly with glyphs. Below them, the darkness breathed. "We need to go back," Tom gasped. "We can't," Elena whispered. "It won't let us." And somehow, they all knew she was right. The tower wasn't just a ruin. It was alive. It had always been alive. And it was unlearning them, stripping away their words, their thoughts, their selves, reducing them back into raw clay, ready to be reshaped. A deep rumble shook the stairwell. Far below, something moved, something vast, ancient, and ravenous. And as the divers reluctantly began to descend, they no longer heard each other's voices on the coms. They only heard the tower. The stairwell coiled downward like the throat of some ancient leviathan, swallowing them step by step into the heart of the tower. The deeper they descended, the colder the water became. Not natural cold, but a dead cold. The kind that seeped into their bones and made even thought feel brittle. Their helmet lights began to dim, one by one, flickering with every pulse from the tower's walls. Tom glanced back to check the others and froze. Victor Shaw, who had sprinted into the side corridor earlier, was standing a few steps above them. His suit was torn and hanging in strips. His faceplate was cracked, spiderweb fractures stretching across the glass, and his mouth was open in a soundless scream. But it wasn't Victor anymore. The thing that wore his body simply stared at them with empty, blackened eyes. Lena screamed through the combs, but no sound emerged. Only static. Only the tower. Without moving a muscle, Victor's body floated upward, as if plucked by invisible hands, vanishing into the darkness above. Gone. Just like that. Tom tried to shout, but found he could no longer form words. His mouth moved, but what came out was garbled, wet sounds, broken syllables, stolen by the water. Beside him, Elena Murrow pressed on, silent, almost entranced. She no longer seemed afraid. She seemed reverent. The walls began to close in, the stairwell narrowing, spiraling tighter, the glyphs along the stone now visibly writhing in the corners of their eyes. Shapes moved between the carvings, slithering things, clawed things, pale and glistening. Lena clutched Tom's arm, fingers digging deep into his suit. "Tom," she gasped, the first clear word he'd heard in what felt like hours. But then her face twisted. She stared past him. Tom turned just in time to see a hand long thin, the skin blistered and black, reaching out of the wall itself. It grabbed Lena by the wrist and pulled. She screamed, her body yanked sideways into the stone like it was made of liquid. Tom lunged, too slow, catching only her air hose as it snapped free from her tank, sending bubbles spiraling upward. In seconds, Lena was gone, swallowed into the wall as if she had never existed. Only her scream remained, echoing in the thick black water, then fading into silence. Tom floated alone now, trembling, his mind fraying at the edges. Elena hadn't even turned around. She just kept descending, deeper and deeper, drawn by the tower's pull. Above him, the black walls closed tighter, sealing off the stairwell behind him. Below him a light flickered, faint and green, pulsing like a heartbeat. Somewhere far beneath, he heard it again. "Enter, kneel, speak." It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. And Tom Reyes, battered, broken, and alone, had no choice but to obey. Tom drifted downward, a broken shadow against the monolithic dark. The stairwell ended abruptly at the threshold of a vast chamber, so immense it felt like the inside of a hollow world. At the center of the chamber stretched an enormous floor, inlaid with a mosaic spiral made of countless tiny tiles, stone, bone, metal, coral, materials that should never have been placed together, fused into a single, writhing design. And the spiral moved, not visibly, not with the eye, but deep within the mind. When Tom stared at it, he felt it pulling him, not forward or backward, but sideways, as if reality itself was folding inward toward the center. Above, the ceiling was lost in murky shadows, but faintly, impossibly, something hung there, a shape too vast to comprehend. It was suspended like a drowned corpse, but its outlines seemed to pulse in time with the tower's whispers. Elena Murrow floated into the center of the spiral. Tom tried to call out to her, but again, only broken, blubbering sounds left his mouth, sounds that didn't belong to any human language. Elena knelt at the spiral's heart, head bowed. The mosaic tiles beneath her began to glow faintly, green, red, sickly white, tracing ancient patterns that seemed to throb like veins. Tom hovered at the edge of the spiral, heart pounding, every instinct screaming at him to turn back, but there was no back anymore. The tower had eaten the way home. The whispering grew into a chorus, 1,000 tongues speaking all at once. Kneel. Submit. Speak. Against his will, Tom's body moved. He sank to his knees just outside the spiral's edge. The water around him vibrated as a low, guttural hum rose from the spiral, a sound that wasn't heard, but felt deep in the bones. And then the spiral room answered, The glyphs on the walls flashed in a dizzying sequence, telling a story. The tower had not been toppled by divine wrath. It had been sealed, buried beneath the sea, not to punish mankind, but to imprison the thing they had built it for. The tower was a transmitter, a beacon, a mouth for something older than the world itself, something that had taught man language only so they might one day call it back. And now, the mouth was opening again. A shadow uncoiled from the spiral, rising slowly, a vast roped figure with no face, only a gaping circular maw where its head should be. Tom tried to scream. No sound. The thing hovered inches above the spiral, its robes writhing like living smoke. It opened its arms. The mosaic shifted, forming new glyphs, words that Tom knew if he read, he would understand. Words that would reshape him. He fought to turn away, but something in the water, in the very pressure of the deep, pressed him down like a hand on the back of his neck. Elena Marrow raised her head. Her face was wrong now. Her eyes were empty sockets. Her mouth was stretched too wide, teeth splintered into sharp fragments. And she spoke. Not English, not anything human. She spoke the true language, the tower's language, the first language, and Tom understood. Not with his mind, but with his flesh. His body began to change, ligaments stretching, bones cracking, lungs shriveling. He wasn't dying. He was being rewritten. The tower's purpose was never to destroy man. It was to reshape them, to make them vessels, mouths, servants, new towers, new beacons, new calls. Above, the colossal shape dangling in the blackness began to stir, muscles flexing, joints creaking like the shifting of a mountain. It had heard the song. It was coming. The spiral room trembled as the great shape above shifted again, a sound like a dying star collapsing into itself. Tom's body was locked in place, half human, half something else, his mind barely clinging to the last tatters of sanity. He felt the change ripple through the water around him, a psychic scream that wasn't heard with ears, but seared directly into the soul. The tower was no longer whispering. It was singing, and the ocean answered. Far above, miles beyond the black veil of water, currents changed. Waves stilled. The sky darkened. Ships drifting on the surface reported strange phenomena. Compasses spinning, birds falling dead from the sky, radios broadcasting languages that had never been invented. In the spiral room, the glowing glyphs bled down the walls like veins burst open. The thing that wore Elena Marrow's body spoke again, a single resonant word that echoed across the chamber. Awaken. It wasn't addressed to Tom. It wasn't addressed to anything human. It was a command, and the deep obeyed. Tom lifted his head in time to see it stir. The colossal shape suspended in the darkness above uncoiled, slowly, like a great parasite shedding its cocoon. Limbs unfolded wrong, twisting in ways no creature should. A head, or something pretending to be a head, craned downward, faceless, vast, dripping shadows into the sea. From its mouth, a ring of endless gnashing teeth, a deep, guttural sound burst forth, a language older than sound itself, vibrating through the bones of the tower. Across the ocean floor, the dead things began to rise. Things fossilized in stone, things buried in ancient shipwrecks, things that had waited in silence, forgotten by the world. From distant trenches and broken seabeds, they answered the tower's call. Above the surface, the waves began to churn violently. Whirlpools opened where no currents should exist. Islands cracked and bled black water. The tower was broadcasting, a beacon to things that should never have existed. Tom tried to scream, but only salt water flooded his lungs. He wasn't Tom anymore. Not fully. He was a speaker now, a living mouthpiece for the tower song. Above, the great creature, the first speaker, descended slowly, arms outstretched toward the spiral room. Tom's last conscious thought flickered. We were never meant to find this. We were meant to forget, to let it sleep. We woke it. We called it back. Then, the spiral room erupted in green light, and Tom was gone, swallowed into the tower's rebirth. Above the trench, the ocean was no longer still. The sea boiled, not from heat, but from movement, a slow, terrible stirring from the abyss. The research vessel Erebus floated helplessly on the churning water, instruments dead, crew paralyzed by terror. Their radio spewed nonsense, languages no human being could translate. Yet somehow, deep inside, they understood the meaning. You were the clay. We were the hands. It is time. Beneath the ship, the tower roared, a deep, thunderous vibration that split the trench open wider. Massive fractures ripped across the seafloor, vomiting clouds of black silt into the water. From the chasms, they came. First, shapes, then bodies. Twisted remnants of things drowned long ago, and things that had never walked the earth. Leviathan-sized eels with skull-like heads. Hulking humanoid figures with too many limbs. Starfish-shaped monstrosities that pulsed and opened thousands of tiny screaming mouths. And all of them singing, not with sound, but with thought, an endless chorus of Babel's forgotten tongues. The crew aboard the Erebus screamed as tentacles thicker than oak trees rose from the waves and wrapped around the hull. Steel shrieked. Antennas snapped. Lifeboats were crushed like paper. Above the ship, the sky twisted into a spiraling maw of clouds. An eye that blinked once, vast and indifferent, staring down at the broken world. The first speaker, the thing that had lain cocooned within the tower, fully emerged now. It was a god to the old gods, a being not made of flesh or spirit but language itself, a living tongue, a moving command. The tower wasn't a monument. It was a communication device. And now it had sent its message. All around the world, the effects rippled outward. In distant coastal cities, radios bled static and children spoke in voices older than mankind. Deep-sea cables snapped, not from pressure, but because something listened through them and crushed them like straws. Whales hurled themselves onto shores, screaming Babel's words through slit mouths. The tower's song reached out like fingers, caressing the minds of everything that lived, reshaping, rewriting, erasing. There was no salvation. The language of men was broken at its source. Reality itself began to stutter, colors twisting wrong, gravity bending sideways, time skipping and folding in on itself. And below it all, the spiral room glowed brighter, a green heart pumping life into the rising swarm. Tom Reyes and Elena Marrow, or what was left of them, knelt at the center of it all, mouths open, voices joining the endless growing chant. The first speaker turned its sightless face toward the surface, the tower's trembling voice reaching a final crescendo. And the sea obeyed. The surface storm raged without mercy. Waves as tall as buildings smashed against the crippled Erebus, tearing the ship apart piece by piece. Sirens wailed. Alarms triggered by systems that no longer existed. Men and women fled to the decks, only to be swept away by the monstrous arms that rose from the Black Sea. Only one managed to survive the initial onslaught. Mason Hawley, the ship's communications officer. He stumbled through shattered corridors, gasping through a cracked rebreather, clutching a portable radio like it was a lifeline. His mind reeled, assaulted by visions that weren't his own. Endless cities submerged beneath red oceans, towers of bone spiraling into dead skies, and voices, oh God, the voices, whispering in languages he shouldn't understand but somehow did. Through broken portholes, he saw them rising. The builders. The things the tower had called home. Massive shapes moved just beneath the waves, their bulk breaking the surface only long enough to reveal grotesque glimpses. Mouths within mouths, endless teeth gnashing in the storm, clusters of blinking eyes stitched into flesh. The tower had done its work. It had awakened them. Mason knew, without doubt, that he could not escape. But maybe he could warn someone. He stumbled into the shattered remains of the Combs room, blood dripping from his ears, his vision swimming. He fumbled with the battered emergency transmitter, fingers slick with seawater and blood. He jammed down the broadcast key. The radio hissed and crackled, static spilling out in bursts. Somewhere deep in the noise, he heard the tower's song, but he screamed over it, forcing out words in a raw, broken voice. Mayday, Erebus, trench, found, tower, it's alive, it's awake. The wall behind him buckled inward. Mason spun, just in time to see a massive, skeletal hand, dripping seaweed and shadow, punch through the steel. It wasn't trying to kill him. It was reaching for him. The tower hadn't sent him to warn anyone. It had sent him to spread the call. Mason's body jerked violently as the hand brushed him, and the language poured into him like molten lead, burning his nerves, hollowing him out. Through his own lips, he spoke one final phrase, not in English, but in the original, perfect tongue. We have returned. The transmission burst out over open channels, carried on storm winds and fractured airwaves, bouncing from buoy to buoy, satellite to satellite. The world heard it, and the world answered. Far across the oceans, ancient ruins shuddered awake beneath deserts, jungles, and mountains. Structures built in imitation of the tower cracked open like eggs, releasing more songs, more calls. The awakening was not local, it was global. And humanity, their minds already fracturing under the weight of the message, had only moments left to remember who they had been, before they became something else. The world shuddered. Cities drowned beneath waves blacker than night. Islands shattered like broken teeth. The sky cracked, bleeding colors that had no name. In the chaos, humanity's last broadcast sputtered and died, not with screams, but with laughter, voices babbling in twisted tongues that no one could translate. The language of Babel had returned, not to divide humanity, but to erase it. Above the Atlantic Trench, the wreckage of the Erebus drifted like a corpse. The tower beneath the sea pulsed slowly, almost lovingly, its spiral glyphs bleeding into the ocean currents. Across the globe, those cursed signals burrowed into every device, every mind, every memory. And people changed. Some dropped to their knees, mouths moving soundlessly, pupils swirling into spirals. Some tore their own flesh apart, carving the glyphs into their bones in frantic ecstasy. Others simply walked into the sea, vanishing without struggle. The first speaker rose higher from the deep, its featureless face turned upward, not toward the sky, but toward something far beyond human sight. It wasn't finished. It was sending. Far out among the dead stars, something had been listening. Something had heard the call. Something was coming. And Earth, broken, babbling, twisting into a mirror of the tower, was ready to receive it. Down in the abyss, in the ruined spiral room, the bodies of Tom Reyes and Elena Marrow, or what was left of them, knelt forever, mouths open in frozen chant, no longer human, no longer even creatures, just extensions of the tower's living mind. Their bodies slowly crumbled to dust, but the song remained. The spiral room pulsed one final time, a deep, resonant thrum that echoed into eternity. The tower, ancient, alien, and utterly victorious, stood silent beneath the endless black sea, waiting, whispering, calling still. Because in the end, the tower was never meant to be destroyed. It was meant to endure,